night air clung to my skin as I pushed through the heavy back door of the Obsidian, the exclusive lounge where I'd been working for the past 8 months. My feet already ached, and my shift hadn't even started. The alley behind the bar smelled of rain-soaked concrete and cigarettes, a scent I'd grown accustomed to during my nightly ritual of steadying my nerves before work. Just 6 hours, I whispered to myself, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. 6 hours of fake smiles, of dodging wandering hands, of calculating every tip against tomorrow's daycare bill. 6 hours before I could crawl back to my sleeping daughter, Lily. The weight of single motherhood pressed down on my shoulders like a physical thing. At 27, I never imagined I'd be raising a 4-year-old alone after her father disappeared with most of our savings, leaving behind nothing but debt and broken promises. The thought of him made my jaw clench. I inhaled deeply, letting the cool October air fill my lungs before straightening my shoulders and heading inside. The Obsidian wasn't your typical bar. Nestled in the heart of the financial district, it catered to men who measured their worth in stock portfolios and foreign sports cars. The interior was all dark wood, amber lighting, and plush leather, a place where deals were made over crystal tumblers of aged whiskey, where the wealthy came to see and be seen. "You're cutting it close, Ellie," Marco, the floor manager, called out as I rushed through the staff entrance. His perpetually tired eyes swept over me. "Table 7's been asking for you." I glanced at the clock, still 3 minutes early. "Table 7? I didn't know I had regulars." Marco's expression softened slightly. He had a soft spot for me since I'd never called in sick, not even when Lily had that terrible flu last winter. "Corner booth. The one that's always reserved on Tuesdays and Fridays. Mr. Castellano." Something about the way Marco said the name, a slight lowering of his voice, a flicker of caution in his eyes, made my skin prickle. I'd noticed the reserved booth before, of course. It sat partially concealed by an ornamental partition, offering a perfect view of the entire lounge while remaining somewhat shadowed. I'd caught glimpses of the men who occupied it, expensive suits, serious expressions, hushed conversations that stopped whenever I approached. "Is there something I should know?" I asked, securing my apron around my waist. Marco hesitated. "Just give him your best service. He tips well." He paused, then added, "And don't ask too many questions. That last bit of advice wasn't necessary. I'd perfected the art of invisibility over the years, especially after Ryan left. I became what people expected. Efficient, pleasant, and forgettable. I took orders, delivered drinks, and vanished until needed again. It was safer that way, easier to keep my head down and focus on what mattered, making enough to give Lily the life she deserved. As I emerged onto the floor, the Obsidian was already filling with its usual clientele. Piano music drifted through the space, mingling with the low hum of conversations and the occasional burst of restrained laughter. I made my way toward the corner booth, notepad in hand, professional smile fixed in place. I felt him before I saw him. It was strange. Like the air pressure changed, like the room's energy suddenly bent toward one point. When I looked up, my practiced smile faltered for just a moment. 4 men occupied the booth. 3 of them were clearly security. Broad-shouldered, vigilant eyes constantly scanning the room, nearly imperceptible earpieces. But it was the 4th man who captured my attention completely. He couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair cut precisely, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. His suit was clearly bespoke, the kind of quality that whispers rather than shouts, but it was his eyes that caused my breath to catch. Dark and intense, observing everything with such focused attention that I felt strangely exposed as his gaze settled on me. "Good evening, gentlemen," I managed, my voice steadier than I expected. "My name is Ellie. I'll be taking care of you tonight." The 3 security men barely acknowledged me, but the 4th, Mr. Castellano, I presumed, studied me with unsettling intensity. Up close, I noticed other details. A slight scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the gleam of an expensive watch partially concealed by his sleeve, the scent of something woodsy and exclusive that seemed to cut through the ambient smells of the bar. "Ellie?" he repeated, my name sounding different in his deep voice, tinged with what sounded like an Italian accent. "Is that short for something?" The question caught me off guard. Patrons rarely asked for my name, let alone inquired about it. Eleanor, I answered automatically. A slight smile curved his lips. Eleanor, he said, as if testing the name. Bring me a Macallan 25, neat. I noted the order, along with the others' requests, all top-shelf whiskeys or bourbons, and turned to leave. And Eleanor? I paused, looking back over my shoulder. Take your time. His eyes held mine for a beat longer than comfortable. I'm in no rush. Something about his steady gaze made my heartbeat quicken, a warning bell chiming faintly in the back of my mind. I nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes following me all the way to the bar. That was my first conscious encounter with Adrian Castellano, though I would later learn he had been watching me for weeks. That night unfolded like many others. The endless dance of taking orders, delivering drinks, calculating tips, but throughout my shift, I remained acutely aware of his presence, of his gaze finding me across the room whenever I moved within his sightline. When I delivered their third round of drinks, Mr. Castellano's fingers brushed against mine as he took the glass. The contact lasted barely a second, but it sent an unexpected jolt through me. Do you enjoy working here, Eleanor? He asked suddenly. I blinked, caught off guard by the personal question. It pays the bills, I answered cautiously. He studied me for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and removed a black credit card, placing it on the table. We're finished for the night. I nodded, taking the card to process their bill. When I returned with the receipt, he had already written in the tip amount, a sum that made my eyes widen slightly. It was more than I'd make in 3 shifts. Thank you, I said quietly, unable to mask my surprise. This is very generous. You have a child? It wasn't a question. I froze, instinctively protective. Excuse me? He gestured subtly toward my wrist, where I wore a simple beaded bracelet. Your bracelet. Those are clearly made by small hands. My fingers went to the uneven strand of colorful beads that Lily had strung together at daycare. I always wore it during my shifts, a tangible reminder of what I was working for. My daughter made it, I admitted, uncertain why I was sharing this with a stranger. She's 4. Something shifted in his expression, a softening so brief I might have imagined it. Children should have their mothers at night, he said, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. Before I could respond, one of his security men murmured something in his ear. Mr. Castellano nodded, then fixed his dark eyes on me once more. Until Friday, Eleanor. It wasn't until they left that I realized he'd spoken as if my serving him again was predetermined, as if some agreement had already been reached without my knowledge. I shivered slightly, telling myself it was just the chill from the air conditioning. The next day passed in its usual blur of domestic chaos. Morning rush to get Lily to daycare, a few precious hours of sleep, laundry, grocery shopping on a painfully tight budget, picking up Lily, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. The rhythm of our small life, constrained but cherished. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, her small fingers wrapped around my bracelet. Mommy, when will I see Daddy again? The question stabbed through me. Ryan had been gone for almost 2 years, his promises to visit his daughter evaporating like morning mist. I stroked her soft blonde curls, so like her father's. I'm not sure, sweetie. Daddy's very busy. Does he still love me? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Of course he does. Very, very much. She seemed satisfied with this, her eyelids growing heavy. I kissed her forehead and slipped out of her room, leaning against the wall outside her door as tears threatened. The truth was, I had no idea where Ryan was. The last I'd heard, he'd moved west with his new girlfriend, apparently unburdened by the responsibilities he'd left behind. Friday arrived too quickly. As I prepared for my shift, I found myself taking unusual care with my appearance, adding a touch of mascara, wearing my hair down instead of in its usual practical bun. I told myself it was just because tips were better when I made an effort, but a voice in the back of my mind whispered otherwise. The Obsidian was unusually busy that night. As I made my rounds between tables, I kept glancing toward the corner booth. It remained empty, and I felt an unsettling mixture of relief and disappointment. He called earlier, Marco informed me during a brief lull. Said he'd be late, wants you to hold the table. I nodded, ignoring the flutter in my stomach. 2 hours into my shift, I was handling a particularly demanding group of finance types when I felt that familiar shift in the room's energy. I turned to see Adrian Castellano entering the lounge, flanked by his usual security detail. But tonight there was something different about him. A tightness around his eyes, a barely contained tension in his movements. As he passed the bar, his gaze locked with mine. Something electric passed between us across the crowded room, and I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. I quickly turned my attention back to my customers, but I could feel his eyes on me, a tangible weight against my skin. When I finally approached his table, he dismissed his security to another booth nearby. The first time I'd seen him without his entourage. "You look troubled," he observed, as I set a tumbler of Macallan before him, not bothering to wait for his order. "Long day," I replied, maintaining my professional distance. "Your usual?" He nodded, but when I turned to leave, his hand captured my wrist, his grip firm, but not painful. "Sit, just for a moment." I glanced nervously at Marco, who was studiously looking anywhere but in our direction. "I'm working," I protested weakly. "Please." The word seemed unfamiliar in his mouth, as if he rarely had cause to use it. Against my better judgment, I slid into the booth opposite him, acutely aware of his security team watching us from across the room. "Why do you work here, Eleanor?" he asked, releasing my wrist but somehow maintaining his hold on me through his intense gaze. "I told you. It pays the bills. There are easier ways to make money." I stiffened. "Not honest ones. Not for someone like me." His mouth curved slightly. "And what kind of person are you?" "A single mother with no college degree and no family support," I answered bluntly. "This job has flexible hours and the tips are decent. I don't have many options." He took a sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of his glass. "Everyone has options. Some just require assistance to see them." There was something dangerous in his words, something that made me want to retreat. I started to slide out of the booth. "I should get back to work." "Your daughter," he said, stopping me. "What's her name?" I hesitated, protective instincts flaring. "Why do you want to know?" "Humor me." "Lily," I finally answered. "Her name is Lily." Something passed across his features, a flash of what looked almost like pain, quickly masked. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the table. "What is this?" I asked, not touching it. "Open it. Later." I stared at the envelope, my heart racing. "Mr. Castellano." "Adrian," he corrected. "I can't accept gifts from customers." His dark eyes held mine. "It's not a gift. It's an opportunity." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the bar. A clearly intoxicated man was arguing loudly with the bartender. I recognized him. A semi-regular who'd tried to get my number several times. "I need to help with that," I said, grateful for the interruption. Adrian's expression darkened as he looked toward the disturbance. "Go. We'll finish this conversation another time." I slipped away, leaving the envelope untouched on the table. For the rest of my shift, I avoided the corner booth, asking another server to handle it. I could feel Adrian watching me, his gaze a physical presence against my skin. When I checked the booth later, both he and the envelope were gone. I told myself I felt relieved. My relief was short-lived. As I left through the back door after my shift, a sleek black car idled in the alley. The back window lowered, revealing Adrian's face, partially shadowed. "Allow me to drive you home," he said, his tone making it clear it wasn't really a request. I clutched my bag tighter. "That's not necessary. I take the bus." "At this hour?" His disapproval was evident. "It's not safe." "I do it every night," I countered, already backing toward the street. He studied me for a moment, then held out the envelope from earlier. "At least take this." Against my better judgment, I approached the car and accepted the envelope, careful not to let our fingers touch. "What is it?" I asked again. "Something that belongs to you," he replied cryptically. "Good night, Eleanor." The car window closed, but the vehicle remained stationary, watching as I walked to the bus stop. Only when the bus arrived did the black car finally pull away. Sitting on the nearly empty bus, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a check, made out to me for an amount that made me gasp audibly. Clipped to it was a note, written in elegant script on heavy cardstock. For Lily's future, this is not charity. This is the beginning of a conversation. A. I stared at the check, my vision blurring. It was enough to cover 6 months of rent, to pay off my remaining debt, to start a small college fund for Lily. It was freedom and terror all at once, because nothing in this world comes without strings. And something told me that Adrian Castellano's strings would bind tighter than most. I didn't cash the check. For 3 days, it sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. I'd stare at it while making Lily's breakfast, the numbers seeming to grow larger each time I looked. During those quiet moments when my daughter napped, I'd take it out, run my fingers over the heavy paper, and imagine what such money could mean for us. A better apartment without the constant drip from the ceiling corner. A proper winter coat for Lily instead of the second-hand one she'd soon outgrow. Maybe even a few classes at the community college for me, but I knew better than to accept gifts from men like Adrian Castellano. Men who carried power like a scent, who watched from shadowed corners with calculating eyes. Men who expected something in return. Tuesday arrived, my next scheduled shift at the Obsidian, and I tucked the uncashed check into my purse. I would return it, make it clear that whatever game he was playing, I wanted no part of it. My life might be modest, but it was mine. Hard-earned and honest. The evening was unusually cold, and I shivered at the bus stop, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. The same black car from Friday night appeared, sliding silently to the curb beside me. The back window lowered. "You look cold," Adrian said, his face half illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Get in." I took a step back. "No, thank you. The bus will be here soon." "Eleanor." Just my name, spoken with quiet authority. "Please." Something in his tone, not demanding, but somehow still unyielding, made me hesitate. A gust of wind cut through my jacket, and I thought about the long, cold wait for the bus, followed by the walk from the stop to the Obsidian. "Just a ride to work," I clarified, already knowing I was making a mistake. He nodded, and the door opened. I slid inside, immediately enveloped in warmth and the rich scent of leather. Adrian sat across from me. The car was more spacious than I'd expected, with facing seats separated by a small console. One of his security men sat silently beside him, eyes forward, expression unreadable. "Thank you," I murmured, keeping my body angled toward the door. Adrian studied me, his dark gaze intent. "You didn't cash my check." I reached into my purse and withdrew the envelope, extending it toward him. "I can't accept this." He made no move to take it. "Why not?" "Because I don't know what it means, what you want in return." A slight smile curved his lips. A fair concern. "Tell me, what do you think I want?" The question hung between us, loaded with unspoken implications. I thought of the way his eyes followed me across the lounge, of the brush of his fingers against mine, of the strange tension that seemed to crackle in the air between us. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I know nothing comes without expectations. Perhaps my only expectation was to see if you would take it." He leaned forward slightly. Many would have, without question. "I'm not many people." His smile deepened. "No, you're not." He nodded toward the envelope still in my hand. "Keep it. Use it or don't. That's your choice. But it's yours." I wanted to refuse again, to insist he take back this complication. But before I could speak, the car slowed to a stop. We had arrived at the Obsidian, the journey taking half the time the bus would have. "One more thing," Adrian said as I reached for the door handle. "I won't be at the lounge tonight." I told myself the twinge I felt wasn't disappointment. "Oh. I have business out of town. I'll return Friday." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small card, offering it to me. "If you need anything while I'm gone, anything at all, call this number." I accepted the card reflexively, noticing it held only a phone number, no name. "I won't need anything." His expression turned serious. "The world can be unpredictable, Eleanor. Indulge me." The intensity in his eyes made it difficult to refuse. I slipped the card into my pocket, then exited the car without another word, the envelope still clutched in my hand. The night passed slowly, without Adrian's magnetic presence in the corner booth. I found myself glancing there throughout my shift, the empty space somehow more conspicuous than when it was occupied. By the end of the night, I'd made a decision. I would cash the check, but only to start a college fund for Lily. None of it would go toward our daily expenses. That way, it truly would be for her future, as his note had suggested. The next morning, after dropping Lily at daycare, I visited my bank. The teller's eyes widened slightly at the amount, but the check cleared without issue. As I completed the paperwork to open a separate savings account for my daughter, a peculiar feeling settled over me, as if I'd just accepted something far more significant than money. Wednesday and Thursday passed uneventfully. I picked up an extra shift on Thursday night to cover for a coworker, grateful for the additional income. The routine of work and motherhood continued. Lily's endless questions about the world, the constant calculations of stretching our limited budget, the bone-deep exhaustion that never quite left me. On Friday morning, as I was rushing to get Lily ready for daycare, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Ms. Bennett? A woman's crisp voice inquired when I answered. This is Sunshine Daycare Center. I'm calling about Lily. My heart stuttered. Is she okay? What happened? She's fine, but she seems to have developed a fever. Our policy requires that she be picked up immediately. I closed my eyes, doing rapid mental calculations. A missed shift at the Obsidian would mean at least $200 less in tips. Money I couldn't afford to lose. But Lily always came first. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, already reaching for my jacket. When I arrived at the daycare, Lily sat alone in the waiting area, her cheeks flushed, her normally bright eyes glazed with fever. She reached for me immediately. Mommy, my head hurts, she whimpered as I gathered her into my arms. I know, baby, I soothed, pressing my lips to her forehead. She was burning up. We're going home right now. The center director approached, her expression pinched with disapproval. She'll need to be fever-free for 24 hours before returning. I nodded, already calculating the cost of missing additional shifts. I understand. By the time we got home, Lily's fever had climbed higher. I gave her children's fever reducer, tucked her into my bed, and called the pediatrician. They couldn't see her until Monday unless her temperature exceeded 103. It was hovering just below that. I placed a cool cloth on her forehead and called the Obsidian, explaining that I couldn't make my shift. Marco was understanding but firm. I'm sorry about your daughter, Ellie, but I need to find someone to cover. I can't promise your usual section will be available when you return. The implied threat was clear. In the competitive world of high-end service, being unavailable meant being replaceable. I hung up feeling sick with worry about Lily's health, about our precarious finances, about the possibility of losing the job that barely kept us afloat. As the afternoon wore on, Lily's fever continued to rise despite the medication. She became lethargic, her small body radiating heat. When her temperature hit 103.5, I knew we needed to go to the emergency room, but the logistics seemed insurmountable. I had no car. A taxi would cost money I didn't have. The bus would expose Lily to the cold and other passengers. In desperation, I remembered the card Adrian had given me. If you need anything at all, call this number. I stared at it for a long moment, weighing pride against necessity. Then I dialed. A man answered on the second ring, not Adrian. Yes, I'm trying to reach Adrian Castellano, I said hesitantly. This is Eleanor Bennett. There was a brief pause. 1 moment. Less than 30 seconds later, Adrian's voice came through the line. Eleanor, what's wrong? Something about his immediate assumption that I was calling out of need rather than desire sent a complicated mix of emotions through me. I'm sorry to bother you. I wouldn't call if it wasn't, tell me what you need, he interrupted, his tone gentle but insistent. It's Lily. She's sick. A high fever. I need to get her to a hospital, but I don't have a way to... What's your address? He cut in, background noise suggesting he was already on the move. I hesitated only briefly before providing it. Apartment 4B. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead before I could respond. I looked down at Lily, her flushed cheeks and labored breathing, and pushed aside my misgivings. Her well-being trumped everything else. True to his word, exactly 20 minutes later, a sharp knock came at my door. I opened it to find Adrian standing there, without his usual security detail. The incongruity of his immaculate appearance against the backdrop of my shabby apartment building struck me forcefully. His eyes moved past me, scanning the small living room before landing on Lily, who was wrapped in a blanket on the couch. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "The fever started this morning, but it's gotten worse in the last few hours." I closed the door behind him, acutely aware of the contrast between his tailored suit and my faded jeans and t-shirt. Adrian moved to the couch, crouching down to Lily's eye level. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "My name is Adrian. I'm going to help you and your mother get to the doctor, okay?" Lily regarded him with fever-bright eyes. "Are you Mommy's friend?" A complicated expression crossed his features. "Yes," he answered simply, then turned to me. "We should go now." Outside, the same black car waited at the curb, engine running. Adrian lifted Lily effortlessly, wrapping her blanket more securely around her as he carried her to the car. I followed with her small backpack containing essentials. Inside the car, I was surprised to find it empty except for the driver, separated by a privacy partition. Adrian settled Lily between us, her small body leaning heavily against my side. "I've arranged for a pediatric specialist to meet us," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Adrian, the emergency room is fine. I just needed transportation. Dr. Levin is one of the best pediatricians in the city," he interrupted calmly. "She's waiting at Mercy Hospital." I blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "That would take days to arrange." A slight smile touched his lips. "Not for me." The implication hung heavily between us, a reminder of the power he wielded, of connections that extended far beyond what I could comprehend. I looked down at Lily, remembering that her well-being was all that mattered right now. "Thank you," I said quietly. Adrian's hand moved across the seat, his fingers briefly brushing against mine. "You don't need to thank me." At the hospital, we bypassed the crowded emergency room entirely, escorted directly to a private exam room where a distinguished-looking woman in a white coat waited. "Mr. Castellano," she greeted with a nod, before turning her attention to Lily. "And you must be my patient. Let's have a look at you, young lady." The next hour passed in a blur of examinations, blood tests, and consultations. "Doctor." Levin diagnosed Lily with a severe case of strep throat that had gone untreated, explaining the high fever. She prescribed antibiotics and insisted on keeping Lily for a few hours of observation and IV fluids. Throughout it all, Adrian remained a silent, steady presence, stepping outside only occasionally to take calls. When Lily was settled in a private room, hooked up to an IV and finally resting comfortably, he approached me in the hallway where I'd stepped out to compose myself. "She'll be fine," he said, his voice a reassuring rumble. "Children are remarkably resilient." I nodded, fighting back tears of relief. I should have brought her in sooner. I just thought it was a cold, and the daycare fees are already so expensive. I trailed off, embarrassed to be discussing financial concerns with him. But Adrian's expression showed no judgment, only a quiet understanding that surprised me. "You're doing the best you can," he said simply. "That's all anyone can do." The sincerity in his voice broke something loose inside me. "Sometimes my best doesn't feel like enough," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Every day is just surviving, making it to the next day. I want more for her, you know? I want her to have opportunities I never had. I want her to know she's secure, that she doesn't have to worry about." I gestured vaguely, encompassing all the financial precarity that shaped our lives. Adrian watched me intently, his dark eyes unreadable. "What about what you want for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. It had been so long since I'd considered my own desires separate from Lily's needs. That stopped mattering when she was born. It shouldn't have to. I laughed softly, without humor. Should and reality rarely align in my experience. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that seemed to belong to a different world than mine. "Reality can be changed, Eleanor," he said quietly, "with the right resources. The right protection." There was something dangerous in his words, in the intensity of his gaze. I took an instinctive step back. "I should check on Lily." Adrian didn't try to stop me, but as I turned to go, he spoke again. I have connections at Brighton Academy. I froze. Brighton Academy was one of the most prestigious private schools in the city, known for its exceptional early education program and astronomical tuition. Lily would thrive there, he continued. She could start next semester. I turned back to him slowly. Why are you doing this? His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like vulnerability. Perhaps I recognize something in you. Something rare. And what's that? Integrity, he answered, the word weighted with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. In my world, that's more precious than diamonds. Before I could respond, Dr. Levin approached, informing us that Lily was responding well to treatment and could go home soon. The moment passed, but Adrian's words lingered, echoing in my mind like a warning or a promise. Hours later, after Lily had been discharged with antibiotics and care instructions, Adrian insisted on driving us home. Lily had warmed to him completely, her natural childish charm emerging as her fever receded. To my surprise, Adrian responded to her incessant questions with patient answers, his usual intimidating demeanor softening in her presence. When we reached my apartment building, Adrian carried a sleeping Lily up the 4 flights of stairs without complaint. I unlocked the door, acutely aware of his eyes taking in the shabby details of my home, the water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the thin walls through which neighbors' arguments regularly filtered. I led him to Lily's small bedroom, where he gently laid her on the bed. I covered her with her favorite blanket, brushing the hair from her forehead, relieved to find her skin cooler than before. When I turned, Adrian was examining the drawings tacked to Lily's wall, bright, childish depictions of houses and stick figures. He touched one lightly, a picture of what appeared to be Lily and me, holding hands beside a house much larger and grander than our apartment. She has talent, he observed quietly. She's obsessed with houses, I explained, moving to stand beside him. She draws them everywhere. I think she wants a backyard. Adrian turned to me, our proximity suddenly apparent in the small room. Every child should have a place to belong, he said softly. A true home. Something in his tone suggested he spoke from experience. I found myself wondering about his childhood, about what had shaped him into the man who now stood in my daughter's bedroom, who had arranged specialized medical care with a single call, who looked at my child's drawings with genuine interest. Thank you, I said. For today. For everything. He reached out, his fingertips brushing my cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. Get some rest, Eleanor. I'll check on you both tomorrow. It wasn't a question or a request, but a statement of fact. And as I watched him leave, I realized I was no longer certain whether to feel fear or anticipation at the prospect of his return. In the quiet that followed his departure, I sat beside Lily's bed, watching her peaceful sleep. The events of the day replayed in my mind. The ease with which Adrian had stepped into our crisis, the power he wielded so effortlessly, the glimpses of unexpected gentleness beneath his controlled exterior. I didn't understand why he had chosen to insert himself into our lives. What could someone like him possibly want from someone like me? But as I finally rose to go to my own bed, I caught sight of Lily's bracelet on my wrist. The uneven beads a reminder of what mattered most. Whatever game Adrian Castellano was playing, whatever his ultimate intentions, one thing was certain. For Lily's sake, I needed to proceed with extreme caution, because men like him didn't enter your life without changing it completely, for better or worse. And as I drifted toward sleep, I couldn't decide which possibility frightened me more. True to his word, Adrian returned the next day. I opened my door to find him standing there with groceries in one hand and a small package wrapped in colorful paper in the other. You didn't have to do this, I said, stepping aside to let him in. I wanted to. His eyes moved past me, searching. How is she? Much better. The fever broke completely overnight. I took the groceries from him, peeking inside the bag to find organic produce, premium cuts of meat, and other items I normally couldn't afford. This is too much. It's food, Eleanor. Nothing more. His tone was gentle but firm, as if he sensed my pride battling with practicality. The gift is for Lily, As if summoned by her name, my daughter appeared in the hallway, her blonde curls tangled from sleep, her cheeks now carrying a healthy flush rather than the fevered red of yesterday. "You came back," she exclaimed, her face lighting up at the sight of Adrian. Something shifted in his expression, a softening that transformed his features, making him look younger, less guarded. "I promised I would." He crouched down to her level, offering her the wrapped package. "This is for you, to help you feel better." Lily took the gift with wide eyes, looking to me for permission. At my nod, she tore into the wrapping paper with the unbridled enthusiasm only a child can muster. Inside was a plush teddy bear wearing a tiny doctor's coat and stethoscope. "He can take care of you when you're sick," Adrian explained, watching her reaction closely. Lily hugged the bear tightly, then, to my surprise, threw her arms around Adrian's neck. "Thank you. I'm going to name him Dr. Bear." For a moment, Adrian seemed frozen, unaccustomed to such uninhibited affection. Then, hesitantly, he returned her embrace, his large hand patting her back with unexpected tenderness. When he stood, I caught a glimpse of something raw in his eyes, before his usual composed mask slid back into place. "Are you hungry?" I asked, partly to break the moment. "I was about to make breakfast. I'd like that," he replied, following me to the small kitchen while Lily retreated to show Dr. Bear her room. There was something surreal about Adrian Castellano standing in my cramped kitchen, his expensive suit and commanding presence at odds with the chipped countertops and aging appliances. Yet he moved through the space with ease, helping me unpack the groceries he'd brought, asking where things belonged as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "You didn't return to work yesterday," he observed as I started preparing pancake batter, a special treat for Lily that I could now afford thanks to his groceries. I whisked the mixture with more force than necessary. "No. Lily needed me." "Will there be consequences?" I hesitated, the reality of my situation settling heavily on my shoulders. "Possibly. Marco implied my regular section might not be available when I return." Adrian's expression darkened. "I'll speak with him." "No," I said quickly, setting down the bowl. "Please don't. I don't want special treatment." "Why not?" "The world runs on special treatment, Eleanor, on connections and favors and power. Not my world." A smile touched his lips. "Your world and mine have already intersected, like it or not." Before I could respond, Lily bounded back into the kitchen. Dr. Bear clutched firmly in her arms, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Throughout breakfast, I watched in fascination as Adrian engaged with my daughter, answering her endless questions with patience, cutting her pancakes into precise triangles when she declared that circles taste boring. There was a natural ease between them that both warmed and worried me. Lily had few male figures in her life. Her father was long gone, and I'd been careful not to introduce her to the few men I'd briefly dated after Ryan left. Yet here she was, chattering comfortably with a man who, despite his unexpected kindness to us, was still essentially a stranger. A stranger with an air of danger and power I couldn't ignore. After breakfast, Adrian insisted on washing the dishes, rolling up his sleeves and revealing strong forearms, marked with a few faint scars I hadn't noticed before. I found myself wondering about their origins as I dried the plates he handed me. "I need to return to work tonight," I said, breaking the companionable silence that had settled between us, "if Lily continues to improve." Adrian nodded. "I'll have someone drive you." "That's not necessary." "It is to me," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. He handed me the last plate, his fingers brushing against mine in a touch that seemed deliberate. "Your safety matters, Eleanor." The intensity in his dark eyes made my breath catch. "Why? Why do you care what happens to us?" For a long moment, he simply held my gaze, something unspoken passing between us. Then Lily called from the living room, breaking the tension. "You should spend the day resting," Adrian said, drying his hands on a towel. "Both of you. I have some business to attend to, but I'll return this evening to drive you to work." Again, not a question or a request, a statement of fact. I was beginning to recognize this pattern with Adrian. He didn't ask. He decided. Under different circumstances, with a different man, this might have raised alarms, but there was something about the way he included my input, the The way he seemed to genuinely consider my comfort even as he overrode my objections that felt less like control and more like protection. After he left, I spent the day with Lily, grateful for the rare opportunity to simply be with my daughter without the constant pressure of work or chores. We built a fort of blankets in the living room, read stories, and napped together in the afternoon. Throughout the day, I found myself glancing at the clock, a flutter of anticipation building as evening approached. Adrian arrived precisely when he said he would, this time with one security man who remained in the car while he came up to the apartment, Ms. Rodriguez from next door had agreed to watch Lily. She often did when I worked evening shifts, and my daughter was excited to introduce her to Dr. Bear. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked, standing in my doorway, his gaze sweeping over me in a way that made me suddenly conscious of my appearance. The simple black dress that was my work uniform, my hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, the minimal makeup I'd applied with more care than usual. I nodded, gathering my purse and jacket. "Thank you for doing this. It's nothing," he replied, though we both knew it wasn't nothing. It was the continuation of whatever had begun between us that first night at the Obsidian, this strange dance of assistance and gratitude, of power and vulnerability. In the car, Adrian sat beside me rather than across from me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Neither of us spoke for several minutes, the silence filled with an electric tension. "I spoke with Brighton Academy," he said finally. "They have an opening for next semester." I stiffened. "Adrian, I can't afford. It's been taken care of." I turned to face him fully. "What does that mean?" His expression remained calm, unreadable. "It means Lily has a place if you want it for her. A full scholarship. There's no such thing as a free scholarship," I said carefully. "What would be expected in return?" Adrian's dark eyes held mine. "Nothing from you, Eleanor. Consider it an investment in potential." "Lily's potential?" A slight smile curved his lips. "Hers. And perhaps yours." There was a weighted meaning in his words that I couldn't fully decipher. "I don't understand what you want from us." He was silent for a moment, considering. "Have you ever had someone believe in you? Truly believe in what you could become, given the right opportunities?" The question struck an unexpected chord. No one had ever seen me as anything more than what I was, a waitress, a single mother, a woman struggling to stay afloat. Not my parents, who had written me off when I became pregnant at 22. Not Ryan, who had seen me as a burden to escape. Not even myself, on my darkest days. "No," I answered honestly. Adrian's hand moved to cover mine, his touch warm and surprisingly gentle. "Then perhaps that's what I want to give you. The chance to become what you could be, without the weight of constant survival pressing you down." His words painted a picture so tempting, it made my chest ache. A life where every decision wasn't dictated by financial necessity. Where Lily could have opportunities I'd never dreamed of. Where I could pursue my own abandoned ambitions. "Why me?" I whispered. "Of all the people you could help, why choose us?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of pain or memory. "Because you remind me of someone who never got the chance to become what she might have been." Before I could ask more, the car slowed to a stop outside the Obsidian. Adrian squeezed my hand once before releasing it. "Think about Brighton, for Lily's sake, if not your own." I nodded, unable to form words around the tangle of emotions in my throat. As I opened the door to exit, he added, "I'll be there tonight, same table." The promise lingered in my mind as I made my way inside. To my relief, Marco greeted me with his usual tired nod, making no mention of my absence the previous night. When I checked the reservation list, I saw why. The corner booth was booked under Castellano for the entire evening, with a specific request for me as server. The night proceeded much as others had before Adrian entered my life. The familiar rhythm of orders and drinks and polite conversation, yet everything felt subtly different, colored by the knowledge of his presence in the corner booth. I was acutely aware of his eyes following me as I moved through the lounge, of the way conversations at his table would pause when I approached. Tonight, he wasn't alone. Besides his usual security, a woman sat beside him, stunningly beautiful, with sleek dark hair and the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of privilege. Something hot and unfamiliar twisted in my stomach as I watched them lean close in conversation, her manicured hand resting casually on his arm. Ellie. Marco's sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. Table 12 needs their check, I nodded, forcing my attention back to my job. Throughout the night, I maintained my professional demeanor, even when serving Adrian's table. I addressed him formally, avoiding his gaze, focusing instead on the drinks and the woman's occasional requests. Eleanor, Adrian said softly, as I cleared their empty glasses. This is my sister, Sophia, sister. The relief that flooded through me was so immediate and intense that I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. The woman, Sophia, gave me a knowing smile that suggested she hadn't missed my reaction. So you're Eleanor, she said, studying me with eyes identical to her brother's. Adrian has mentioned you. I glanced at him, surprised. Has he? Incessantly, Sophia replied with a mischievous grin, though he failed to mention how pretty you are. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Can I get you anything else? Actually, Adrian interjected, Sophia was just leaving. He gave his sister a pointed look that she returned with an amused shrug. Duty calls, she explained to me, gathering an elegant purse. But I do hope we'll meet again, Eleanor. Perhaps under less formal circumstances. After she departed, escorted by one of the security men, the atmosphere at the table changed. Adrian dismissed the remaining guard with a subtle gesture, leaving us alone when I returned with his usual Macallan. Your sister seems nice, I offered, setting the drink before him. She's a menace, he replied, but with obvious affection, and far too interested in my personal affairs. Is that what I am? The question slipped out before I could stop it. A personal affair? His dark eyes met mine, intense and unreadable. You are unexpected, Eleanor. In my life, unexpected things are rarely welcome. They represent variables, complications, potential weaknesses. He took a sip of his whiskey, never breaking eye contact. Yet, here you are. The weight of his words settled between us. Heavy with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I took a step back. I should check on my other tables. Adrian nodded. When does your shift end tonight? Midnight. I'll be here. The remaining hours of my shift passed in a blur of routine tasks, though I remained hyper-aware of Adrian's presence in the corner. He stayed the entire time, occasionally speaking on his phone, but mostly observing the room, and me, with calculated attention. As midnight approached, an unexpected commotion erupted near the entrance. A man's raised voice cut through the lounge's subdued atmosphere. I turned to see a face that sent ice through my veins. Ryan, Lily's father, arguing with the host at the door. He was clearly intoxicated, his handsome features flushed with alcohol and anger. I just want to talk to Ellie, he insisted loudly. She works here, right? Eleanor Bennett. I froze, panic rising in my throat. I hadn't seen Ryan in almost 2 years, had no idea he even knew where I worked. From the corner of my eye, I saw Adrian stiffen, his attention razor-sharp as he took in the scene. Marco approached Ryan, trying to defuse the situation. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't allow... There she is! Ryan spotted me, pushing past Marco with the reckless confidence of the thoroughly drunk. Ellie, baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. I took an instinctive step back as he approached, my heart hammering against my ribs. Ryan, what are you doing here? I came to see you. He reached for me, his movements clumsy. I miss you. I miss Lily. I made a mistake, baby. You need to go, I said firmly, though my voice trembled slightly. You're drunk, and I'm working. His expression darkened. Still got that stick up your ass, huh? Always so fucking righteous. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. I have a right to see my daughter. Let go of me, I hissed, trying to pull away without causing a bigger scene. The last thing I needed was to lose my job over this. Ryan's grip tightened. We need to talk about... The lady asked you to let go. Adrian's voice, though quiet, cut through the tension like a blade. He stood just behind Ryan, his posture relaxed, but his eyes cold with a contained fury that made my blood run cold. Ryan turned, sizing Adrian up with the poor judgment of the deeply intoxicated. "Who the fuck are you? Her new sugar daddy?" Adrian didn't react to the provocation, his gaze flicking briefly to where Ryan's fingers still encircled my wrist. "I won't repeat myself," he said, each word precise and measured. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty that he would be obeyed, seemed to penetrate even Ryan's alcohol-fogged brain. He released my wrist, taking a small step back. "Whatever, man. This is between me and her." Ryan turned back to me. "I need money, Elle. Just a loan until I get back on my feet. For Lily's sake." The familiar pattern, Ryan's promises, his manipulations, the way he wielded our daughter as a tool to get what he wanted, ignited a spark of anger that burned through my fear. "You don't get to use her name," I said, my voice stronger now. "Not after disappearing for 2 years. Not after everything you've put us through." Ryan's face twisted with rage. "You self-righteous bitch. I have rights." He never finished the sentence. In one fluid motion, Adrian stepped between us, his hand closing around Ryan's throat with precise pressure, not enough to choke, but enough to command complete attention. "Rights," Adrian repeated, the word dripping with contempt. "Let's discuss rights." He leaned closer to Ryan, whose eyes had widened with sudden, belated sobriety. "You surrendered any rights when you abandoned your child, when you put your hands on her mother in my establishment." My breath caught. My establishment. The implications of those 2 words crashed over me like a wave. "I own this place," Adrian continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous murmur that somehow carried clearly to my ears, and several others throughout the city. "I have connections in places you've never heard of. I can make things very difficult for a man with your history." Ryan paled visibly. "Look, I didn't know. Now you do." Adrian released him with a slight push. "If you contact Eleanor again without her explicit invitation, if you come within 100 feet of her or her daughter, I will ensure it's the last mistake you ever make. Am I perfectly clear?" Ryan nodded jerkily. All bravado evaporated. He cast one last frightened glance at me before hurrying toward the exit, nearly tripping in his haste to escape. The lounge had gone silent during the confrontation, all eyes on us. Adrian turned to the room at large, his expression smoothly transitioning to one of polite authority. "Please, enjoy your evening," he said, his tone suggesting that nothing unusual had occurred. "The next round is on the house." The subtle command worked. Conversations gradually resumed, attention shifting away from us. Marco approached, his expression a mixture of concern and deference I'd never seen him direct toward me. "Take the rest of the night off, Ellie," he said quietly. "With pay." "Mr. Castellano's orders." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. Adrian's hand settled gently on the small of my back, guiding me toward the staff area. "Get your things," he murmured close to my ear. "I'm taking you home." In the back room, my hands trembled as I gathered my purse and jacket. The events of the past few minutes replayed in my mind, the sudden appearance of Ryan, Adrian's intervention, the revelation that he owned the Obsidian. Owner. Not just a powerful customer, not just a wealthy patron, but my actual employer. When I emerged, Adrian waited by the back door, his posture tense but controlled. In the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway, I could see the dangerous edge that lurked beneath his polished exterior more clearly than ever. "You own the bar," I said, as we stepped into the alley. It wasn't a question. "Yes." No elaboration, no excuses. "How long have you been watching me?" His dark eyes met mine. "Since the first night you served my table. 3 months ago." The revelation should have frightened me, should have sent me running in the opposite direction. Instead, I felt a strange, twisted sense of safety, knowing that his interest, whatever its nature, hadn't begun with chance or impulse, but with deliberate attention. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything?" he countered. "Would you have accepted my help more readily, knowing I was your employer? Or would you have run?" I considered this as we approached his waiting car. "I might have run," I admitted finally. A slight smile touched his lips. "Exactly." In the car, silence settled between us, heavy with unasked questions and unspoken truths. Adrian watched me, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Who was he?" he asked finally. Besides Lily's father, I looked down at my hands, at the faint red marks Ryan's fingers had left on my wrist, my ex. We were together for 3 years. He left when Lily was 2, took our savings, disappeared. I laughed humorlessly. Classic story. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "Before tonight." The question hung between us, laden with dangerous potential. I chose my words carefully. Not physically, but there are many ways to hurt someone. His expression darkened. "Yes, there are." The certainty in his voice suggested personal knowledge. Whether as victim or perpetrator, I couldn't tell. Both possibilities sent a shiver down my spine. "He won't bother you again," Adrian said with absolute conviction. "What did you mean?" I asked. "About his history?" A calculating look crossed his features, as if he was deciding how much to reveal. "I had you and Lily investigated when I first became interested, standard procedure in my position. Ryan has outstanding debts to some very unpleasant people I know. The casual admission that he had investigated us should have angered me, violated me. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Is that why you approached me? Some connection to Ryan?" "No." Adrian's voice was firm. "My interest in you has nothing to do with him." His hand moved across the seat to cover mine, his touch warm and steady. "Nothing." As the car pulled up to my apartment building, Adrian instructed his driver to wait, then accompanied me inside. We climbed the stairs in silence, the events of the night settling between us like a weight. At my door, I hesitated, key in hand. "Thank you for what you did tonight." Adrian studied me, his dark eyes intense in the dim hallway light. "You don't need to thank me for that." "Yes, I do," I insisted quietly. "No one has ever stood up for me like that." Something flashed in his expression. Anger, perhaps, at the implication that I had faced such situations alone before. "That changes now," he said, his voice low and certain. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the marks on my wrist. The touch sent electricity through my veins, awakening sensations I'd thought long dormant. I looked up, finding his face closer than I expected, his eyes holding a question. In that moment, suspended between fear and desire, between caution and need, I made a choice. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and pressed my lips to his. Adrian remained still for only a heartbeat before responding, his hand moving to cradle my face with surprising gentleness. The kiss deepened, igniting something primal and hungry within me. His other arm wrapped around my waist, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, I saw raw vulnerability in his eyes, a glimpse behind the mask of control and power he wore so seamlessly. "Eleanor," he murmured, my name a question and a caution all at once. "Stay," I whispered, surprising myself with my boldness, just for a while. He studied me intently, then nodded, following me into the apartment. Ms. Rodriguez had left a note saying Lily was asleep, had taken her medicine, and had eaten well. I checked on my daughter, finding her peacefully curled around Dr. Bear, before returning to the living room. Adrian stood by the window, his silhouette cut against the city lights beyond. In that moment, I saw him clearly for what he was. Dangerous, powerful, a man accustomed to control and command. And yet, in the gentle way he had interacted with my daughter, in his fierce protection tonight, I glimpsed something else, a capacity for tenderness that perhaps few had ever witnessed. As I moved toward him, drawn by forces I couldn't fully understand, I knew I was stepping into something that would irrevocably change my life. For better or worse, Adrian Castellano had become entwined in my existence, in my daughter's future, in possibilities I had never dared to imagine. And despite every rational warning bell sounding in my mind, I couldn't find it in myself to turn back. Adrian didn't stay the night. After an hour of quiet conversation on my worn couch, his phone buzzed with a message he couldn't ignore. "Business," he explained vaguely. Before leaving, he kissed me again, a gentle, almost reverent touch that lingered on my lips long after he was gone. The next week unfolded like a dream. Or perhaps a carefully orchestrated play. Adrian had his driver take me to work each night, waiting to bring me home after my shift. Every morning, fresh groceries appeared at my door. Twice, small packages arrived for Lily, educational toys that delighted her. Adrian himself visited every other day, always bringing something thoughtful. A book I'd mentioned wanting to read, a proper winter coat for Lily, a set of professional knives when I mentioned enjoying cooking. I should have been suspicious of his generosity. Instead, I found myself warming to it, to him. Our conversations grew deeper, though he remained carefully guarded about certain aspects of his life. He spoke of his sister with genuine affection, mentioned a difficult relationship with his father, revealed a passion for classical architecture. But whenever I asked about his work, he deflected with practiced ease. "It's better if you don't know the details," he told me one evening as we sat at my tiny kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed. Safer. The word hung between us, laden with implications I chose not to examine too closely. Instead, I focused on the way his presence filled my small apartment with a magnetic energy, how his eyes softened when he looked at me, how naturally he had begun to fit into the rhythms of our life. On Friday night, after my shift at the Obsidian, Adrian didn't take me straight home as usual. "I want to show you something," he said, as the car pulled away from the curb. "Do you trust me?" The question carried weight beyond the immediate moment. Did I trust him? This man who had appeared in my life so suddenly, who wielded power like a second skin, whose world clearly operated by different rules than mine. "Yes," I answered, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. We drove to a quiet residential neighborhood filled with elegant brownstones. The car stopped before one particularly beautiful building with gleaming windows and a small, immaculately maintained garden visible through wrought iron fencing. "What is this place?" I asked, as Adrian helped me from the car. "A possibility," he replied cryptically, guiding me up the steps with a hand at the small of my back. He unlocked the door with a key produced from his pocket, revealing an interior that took my breath away. High ceilings, hardwood floors, walls painted in soft, warm tones, and tasteful furniture that invited comfort without sacrificing elegance. "This is yours?" I asked, moving slowly into the space, taking in the details. "It could be yours," he corrected quietly, "and Lily's." I turned to him, stunned. "What?" Adrian approached, his expression serious. "This apartment has 3 bedrooms, a study that could be converted to a playroom, and a garden where Lily could have that backyard she dreams of. It's 5 blocks from Brighton Academy." "Adrian," I began, overwhelmed by what he was suggesting. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Is it?" He moved closer, his dark eyes intent on mine. "Tell me something, Eleanor. Are you happy in that apartment? Does Lily have the space she deserves? Do you feel safe there, especially after Ryan's appearance?" The mention of Ryan sent a chill through me. Though I hadn't seen or heard from him since that night at the Obsidian, the memory of his angry, desperate face lingered in my nightmares. "No," I admitted, "but I can't just accept a home from you." "Why not?" Adrian's hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentle. "What if I need you to accept it as much as you need the security it offers?" Something in his voice, a vulnerability I rarely glimpsed, made me ask, "What do you mean?" He was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheekbone. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who want things from me. My money, my influence, my protection. Never just me." His eyes held mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't fully decipher. "Until you. You've given me so much," I whispered. "I have nothing to offer in return." "That's precisely why He stopped himself, seeming to reconsider his words. "That's what makes you different, unique." He led me through the rest of the apartment, showing me each carefully designed room, the master bedroom with its luxurious ensuite bathroom. The second bedroom, already furnished with a child's canopy bed and bookshelves. The third bedroom, set up as a guest room but which, he suggested, could be converted to whatever purpose I desired. In the kitchen, a chef's dream with marble countertops and top-of-the-line appliances. Adrian pulled me close, his arms encircling my waist. "Say yes," he murmured against my hair. "Let me give you and Lily this safety." I leaned into his embrace, torn between pride and practicality. What would people think? What would Lily think when she's old enough to understand? "What people think has never concerned me," he replied. "As for Lily, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." We. The casual use of the plural sent a flutter through my chest. Adrian had been in our lives for such a short time, yet I could no longer imagine a future without him in it. "I need to think about it," I said finally. He nodded, accepting my hesitation without argument. "Of course." Later that night, as we stood outside my apartment door, Adrian kissed me with an intensity that left me breathless. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised. But tomorrow came and went without word from him. So did the next day. By Sunday evening, a cold knot of anxiety had formed in my stomach. Had he grown tired of my reluctance? Had my failure to immediately accept his generous offer offended him? Monday brought my day off from the Obsidian. As I helped Lily build a tower of blocks on our living room floor, a sharp knock at the door interrupted our play. I opened it to find Sophia, Adrian's sister, her usual elegance somewhat diminished by the tension evident in her posture. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice strained. "It's about Adrian." Fear gripped me as I stepped aside to let her enter. "What's happened? Is he okay?" Sophia cast a meaningful glance at Lily, who watched us curiously from her spot on the floor. I nodded in understanding. "Lily, sweetheart, why don't you take Dr. Bear to your room for a bit? Mommy needs to talk to this lady." Once Lily had disappeared down the hallway, Sophia spoke in a low, urgent tone. "Adrian's been arrested." The words hit me like a physical blow. Arrested? For what, officially? Racketeering, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, a gesture so reminiscent of her brother that it made my chest ache. In reality, it's a power play by a rival organization. They've been planning this for months, building a case with the help of someone on the inside. The implications of her words settled over me slowly. I'd suspected Adrian's business wasn't entirely legitimate, had recognized the signs of authority and danger that surrounded him. But hearing it confirmed so plainly made it impossible to maintain the comfortable ignorance I'd cultivated. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "His lawyers are working on bail, but the prosecution is arguing he's a flight risk." Sophia's dark eyes, so like Adrian's, held mine intently. "There's something you need to know, Eleanor. Something Adrian should have told you himself." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What?" "The reason he approached you initially, it wasn't random." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Your ex, Ryan. He worked for Adrian's organization briefly, about 3 years ago. He was caught skimming money, selling information to competitors. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. What are you saying? Adrian was going to deal with him, permanently. But then he learned Ryan had a child. A daughter. Sophia's expression softened. Adrian has a code. Children don't suffer for their parents' mistakes. So instead of having Ryan eliminated, he exiled him, threatened him to stay away from the city, from his connections. It was meant to be a mercy. I sank onto the couch, trying to process this revelation. So when Adrian saw me at the Obsidian, he recognized your name from the investigation into Ryan. He was curious. He wanted to see what kind of woman had been caught in Ryan's web, whether you were involved in his schemes. Sophia sat beside me, her voice gentler now. But what he found was something he never expected. Someone honest, hardworking, devoted to her child. Someone who reminded him of our mother. Your mother? A shadow passed over Sophia's face. She died when Adrian was 15, I was 12. Cancer. Our father changed after that. Became harder, colder. Adrian took the brunt of it, protecting me. She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. He sees himself as a protector, Eleanor. Always has. I thought of the way Adrian interacted with Lily, the fierce protectiveness he'd shown toward me with Ryan, his insistence on providing us a safer home. The pieces began to fit together in a new pattern. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because Adrian has been asking for you since his arrest. He won't speak to his lawyers until he sees you." Sophia reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. "He asked me to give you this, and to take you to him, if you're willing." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Adrian's precise handwriting. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, circumstances have forced a conversation I've been avoiding. By now, Sophia will have told you some truths about me, about how our paths first crossed. There is more, much more, that you deserve to know. I planned to reveal everything when the time was right. I wanted to give you the chance to know me, the man, not the reputation, before you learned the nature of my business. Perhaps that was selfish. Perhaps I feared losing what was beginning to grow between us. I am not a good man by conventional standards. I've done things I can never undo. But I've tried to live by a code, to protect those who deserve protection, to keep my word once given. I understand if you choose to walk away. I wouldn't blame you, but if there's any part of you that believes what we've shared is real, I ask only for the chance to speak with you one last time. The choice, as always, is yours." I folded the letter, my emotions a turbulent storm. Part of me wanted to retreat, to shield Lily and myself from the complications of Adrian's world. Another part remembered the tenderness in his eyes when he looked at my daughter, the gentle strength of his arms around me, the way he made me feel simultaneously protected and empowered. "When can I see him?" I asked finally. Relief washed over Sophia's face. "Now, if you're ready. I've arranged everything." I called Ms. Rodriguez to watch Lily, changed my clothes, and followed Sophia to the waiting car. As we drove toward the federal detention center, my mind raced with questions. What would happen to Adrian? What would this mean for us? For the fragile, beautiful thing that had been growing between us? Most importantly, could I love a man whose world operated in shadows I'd only begun to glimpse? The answer, I realized with a clarity that should have frightened me, was that I already did. The detention center was a stark, imposing building of concrete and steel. Inside, after surrendering my phone and passing through security, I was led to a private visitation room, a privilege I suspected few inmates received. When Adrian entered, my breath caught in my throat. He wore a standard-issue jumpsuit that should have diminished his natural authority, but somehow failed to. His face was drawn, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, but his posture remained proud, unbowed. His eyes found mine immediately, a flash of emotion crossing his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. "Eleanor." Just my name, spoken softly, as if testing whether he still had the right to say it. "Adrian." I remained seated at the metal table, hands folded before me. He took the seat opposite, maintaining a careful distance. Up close, I could see the toll of the past days, the tension in his jaw, the weariness etched into the lines around his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. "Sophia told me about Ryan, about why you noticed me." Adrian nodded slowly. "I should have told you myself." "Yes, you should have." I met his gaze directly. "What else haven't you told me?" He held my eyes for a long moment, then spoke with measured precision. "I am the head of an organization that controls several legitimate businesses throughout the city, including the Obsidian. We also control certain less legitimate enterprises. Gambling, primarily, some loan operations, protection services. The clinical way he described his criminal empire should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself appreciating his honesty, however belated. "And the charges against you?" I asked. "Orchestrated by rivals, executed by corrupted officials, but not entirely without foundation." His mouth curved in a humorless smile. "No one in my position has entirely clean hands, Eleanor." I thought of his hands. Strong, elegant, capable of violence, but also of surprising gentleness when holding mine, when touching my face, when helping Lily build her block tower. "What happens now?" I asked, echoing my earlier question to Sophia. "My lawyers will negotiate. Evidence will mysteriously become compromised. Witnesses will reconsider their statements." His tone was matter-of-fact. "This isn't my first legal entanglement, though it is the most serious. And if the negotiations fail? Something flickered in his eyes, not fear, exactly, but a cold calculation. Then I face a significant prison sentence. The reality of his situation, of our situation, settled over me like a weight. This man, who had entered my life so suddenly and transformed it so completely, might disappear just as abruptly. Adrian, I began, uncertain what I even wanted to say. I don't know if I can... I'm not asking you to wait, he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. What I'm offering hasn't changed. The apartment, Lily's education, your financial security. All of it is arranged regardless of what happens to me. I don't want your money, I said, a flare of anger rising unexpectedly. I wanted... What? He pressed when I faltered. What did you want from me, Eleanor? The question pierced through my confusion, forcing me to confront the truth. I wanted you, I whispered. Just you. Adrian's expression transformed, the careful mask slipping to reveal raw vulnerability. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching mine. You have me, in whatever capacity remains possible. I stared at his outstretched hand, understanding the choice before me. I could walk away now, protect myself and Lily from further entanglement with his complicated, dangerous world. Or I could accept what he offered, not just the material security, but the connection we'd formed, imperfect and fragile though it might be. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. I need you to promise me something, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to face this, whatever this is, I need honesty. You have my word, he replied, his dark eyes solemn. No more secrets between us. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, bail hearings, and emotional upheaval. Adrian was finally released on an exorbitant bail, with restrictions that included electronic monitoring and limited movement. The legal battles were far from over, but at least he was out of detention. During those weeks, I had moved Lily and myself into the brownstone apartment. I told myself it was practical. The security system and doorman provided protection I suddenly felt we needed. But the truth was more complex. Being surrounded by spaces Adrian had chosen, had prepared for us, made his absence more bearable somehow. When he was finally able to visit, Lily ran to him without hesitation, throwing her arms around his legs with a joyful, "Adrian!" that brought an unguarded smile to his face. He crouched to her level, listening with genuine interest as she excitedly showed him her new room, her new toys, the small garden where she'd planted sunflower seeds. Later, after Lily was asleep, we sat in the living room, the city lights glimmering beyond the windows. Adrian looked both out of place and perfectly at home in this setting. The elegant furnishings suited him, yet there was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there before his arrest. My lawyers are optimistic, he said, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. The case against me is already beginning to unravel. Because of your influence? I asked. No judgment in my tone, just a desire to understand. Partly. He met my eyes, honoring our promise of truth, but also because much of the evidence was fabricated or obtained illegally. Even legitimate law enforcement can't build a case on such foundations. I nodded, accepting this reality of his world. Over the past weeks, I'd done considerable thinking about moral absolutes, about the gray areas most lives actually occupied, my own included. What happens if you're cleared? I asked. Everything goes back to how it was before? Adrian studied me, his expression thoughtful. No. Some things must change. He set down his glass, leaning forward. I've been transferring more operations to legitimate businesses for years. This situation has accelerated that timeline. You're leaving behind the illegal activities? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Transitioning, he corrected. Gradually. Some ventures are more complicated to unwind than others. But yes, eventually. His eyes held mine intently. Not because I've suddenly developed conventional morality, Eleanor, but because I've found something worth protecting more than my empire. The weight of his words, the implication behind them, made my heart race. Adrian, I love you. He said it simply, directly. The declaration hanging in the air between us. I didn't expect to, didn't want to initially, but I do. For a moment I couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions I'd been holding at bay. This is crazy, I finally managed. We barely know each other, don't we? He moved to sit beside me, taking my hands in his. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you'd sacrifice everything for Lily without hesitation. I know you're intelligent, compassionate, stubborn. A small smile touched his lips. I know you sing under your breath when you think no one's listening. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. That you sleep curled on your right side. That you're afraid of thunderstorms but pretend not to be for Lily's sake. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. When did you notice all that? From the beginning. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I see you, Eleanor. All of you. And you still want this? Us? I gestured vaguely, encompassing the complicated reality of our situation, even with everything happening, especially now. His expression was more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. What I feel for you, for Lily, it's become my anchor, my reason to fight, to change, to become something better than what I've been. In that moment, looking into his eyes, I recognized the truth I'd been fighting. I loved him too. Despite the complications, despite the danger, despite the uncertain future. Or perhaps because of all those things, because he had shown me strength and tenderness in equal measure, had offered protection without demanding subjugation, had seen value in me when I'd forgotten my own worth. I love you too, I whispered. The admission both terrifying and liberating. The months that followed were not easy. Adrian's legal battles continued. Though gradually, as he had predicted, the case against him weakened. I returned to work, not at the Obsidian, but at a small cafe near Lily's new school, a job that allowed me to be home when she finished classes. Adrian divided his time between his business obligations, legal meetings, and us. He never stayed overnight when Lily was home, careful to maintain appropriate boundaries as we navigated this new relationship. But he became a steady presence in our lives, helping with homework, teaching Lily to play chess, joining us for dinner most evenings. Gradually, cautiously, we built something that felt like family, not perfect, not conventional, but real and solid and ours. One evening, nearly a year after our first encounter at the Obsidian, Adrian took me to dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor. As we finished our meal, he reached across the table for my hand. The last charges were dismissed today, he said, his expression a complex mixture of relief and determination. The case is closed. Joy surged through me. That's wonderful news. There's more. He hesitated, something uncharacteristically uncertain in his manner. The restructuring of my businesses is nearly complete. Everything above board, legitimate. A wry smile. Mostly legitimate. I returned his smile, understanding that change, real change, came in degrees. I'm proud of you. His expression softened. There's one more thing I want to change. He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. One more step toward becoming the man you deserve. My breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring, elegant and understated rather than ostentatious, perfectly aligned with my taste. Eleanor Bennett, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Will you marry me? Time seemed to suspend as I looked at the ring, at his face, at the future he was offering. Not a perfect future. There would always be shadows in Adrian's past, always be elements of his world that operated in gray areas, but a future built on truth, on mutual respect, on the love that had grown between us despite every obstacle. Yes, I answered, certainty filling me completely. Yes, I will. Later that night, as we stood in the garden behind our brownstone, Adrian's arms around me as we gazed at the stars, visible through the city's light pollution, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From a vulnerable single mother and a powerful, isolated man to partners, to family, to a future neither of us could have imagined that first night at the Obsidian. What are you thinking? Adrian murmured against my hair. That sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations, I replied, turning in his embrace to face him. His smile, rare and genuine, warmed me from within. And this is just the beginning, he promised, sealing the words with a kiss that tasted of certainty, of belonging, of home. In his arms, with Lily sleeping peacefully upstairs, I knew he was right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The former waitress and the reformed Mafia boss, building a life that defied expectations but fulfilled our deepest needs: love, family, and the courage to become more than our past had prepared us to be.